The next major American economic warning sign might not flash across a stock ticker or break through a cable news banner. It might appear on a glowing drive-through menu board in your neighborhood. It might show up in the price of a combo meal that suddenly feels heavier on your wallet than it did a year ago. And it might quietly signal that something deeper is shifting beneath the surface of the U.S. economy. Right now, one of the most iconic companies in the world is navigating one of the most complex periods in its modern history. McDonald's, long considered the benchmark for affordable fast food in America, is dealing with slower store traffic, rising input costs, and strategic restructuring that reflects pressures far beyond the restaurant industry. What is unfolding inside the company is not just a business adjustment. It is a window into how trade policy, tariffs, inflation, and consumer strain intersect in real time. For decades, McDonald's built its dominance on reliability. Customers knew what to expect. The food tasted the same whether you were in Ohio or Arizona. Service was designed for speed, and most critically, pricing felt accessible to working families. During past economic slowdowns, fast food often benefited from consumers trading down for more expensive dining options. When budgets tightened, quick service restaurants absorbed the demand. This cycle feels different. Over the past 18 months, McDonald's pushed aggressively into modernization. New beverage concepts, refreshed store layouts, digital ordering enhancements, menu experimentation aimed at expanding margins and attracting younger consumers. The strategy was designed for growth and long-term positioning in a competitive landscape increasingly shaped by technology and delivery platforms. But the macroeconomic backdrop shifted quickly. Customer traffic began to soften in several U.S. regions. Operating expenses accelerated. Labor costs remained elevated. Commodity prices became more volatile. And then, the trade environment changed. In early 2025, a renewed tariff expansion under an America First framework imposed substantial import duties across a range of categories. Certain goods from Canada and Mexico faced tariff levels beginning near 25%, with the possibility of further escalation in agriculture, food processing inputs, and packaging materials. The stated objective was to protect American industries and encourage domestic production. The ripple effects were immediate. Canada introduced retaliatory measures targeting billions in U.S. exports, including agricultural products such as beef and dairy. The European Union responded with its own trade countermeasures. Global commodity markets reacted to the uncertainty. For companies operating across integrated North American supply chains, the friction translated into rising costs. McDonald's does not operate as a purely domestic enterprise. Its supply system is engineered for efficiency across borders. Beef, potatoes, dairy products, sauces, paper packaging, and processing materials frequently move between countries before reaching a restaurant. The system is optimized around precision timing and minimal inventory storage. Margins are maintained through scale and predictability. Tariffs disrupt predictability. When import duties rise, suppliers absorb the first shock. Those costs rarely remain contained. They move downstream. Agricultural producers adjust pricing. Processors raise rates. Packaging providers pass along higher input expenses. For restaurants already managing narrow operating margins, even incremental cost increases matter. Recent data reflects rising beef prices compared to historical baselines. Dairy markets have shown increased volatility. Potato processing and transportation costs have trended upward. Paper and packaging materials have encountered tariff-related adjustments. In an industry where average profit margins often sit near 5%, sustained cost escalation compresses flexibility quickly. McDonald's began feeling the pressure across multiple fronts. Promotional campaigns designed to maintain traffic required deeper discounting. Value meal bundles, once a dependable profit driver, generated thinner margins. At the same time, American households were contending with broader inflation across housing, utilities, insurance, and groceries. Dining out became more discretionary. When a fast food meal approaches the cost of preparing food at home, the traditional value equation weakens. U.S. same-store sales growth slowed relative to previous years. International segments displayed uneven performance. Investor sentiment turned cautious as analysts recalibrated earnings projections. The company's stock performance reflected a more defensive outlook. Inside corporate leadership, the emphasis shifted toward stabilization. Operational cost controls intensified. Menu engineering strategies were revisited. Supply diversification efforts accelerated. The objective was not expansion at any cost, but margin preservation in a volatile environment. Part of that strategy reportedly involved expanding certain processing relationships outside tariff-impacted channels. From a financial perspective, diversifying supply inputs can shield the company from concentrated cost exposure. However, such adjustments introduce reputational complexity in a climate where domestic job sensitivity is heightened. McDonald's brand identity is deeply woven into American economic culture. Moves perceived as reducing domestic production, even if driven by cost realities, carry political and social weight. Meanwhile, competition intensified. Rival chains launched aggressive limited-time value promotions. Discount-driven marketing campaigns resurfaced across the quick-service sector. Price competition sharpened as brands fought to capture cautious consumers. In a market where loyalty is fluid and price sensitivity rises during economic strain, small differences in value perception influence traffic significantly. The broader implications extend well beyond one company's earnings report. McDonald's anchors a vast supply ecosystem. When corporate margins compress, financial pressure moves outward. Some suppliers have adjusted production levels. Certain franchise locations have modified operating hours to manage labor costs. Investment in store expansion has slowed in select markets. These adjustments are incremental, but they accumulate across an industry employing over 14 million Americans. Economists frequently describe tariffs as a tax on importers, yet the economic burden rarely stops there. Suppliers pass along increases. Restaurants adjust pricing structures. Consumers ultimately absorb part of the impact. The philosophical debate surrounding trade policy centers on long-term objectives. Protectionist strategies aim to strengthen domestic production and reduce external reliance. In theory, reshoring supply chains can create resilience. In practice, globally integrated industries face transitional friction when trade relationships shift abruptly. Fast food illustrates this complexity clearly. Ingredients and materials often originate in multiple countries. Processing networks span borders. Packaging components rely on international sourcing. When trade barriers increase, the friction reverberates through every link in that chain. For American households navigating higher living costs, discretionary spending contracts first. Dining out becomes optional rather than routine. Lower customer traffic tightens restaurant margins. Margin pressure drives operational restructuring. Restructuring influences employment patterns and local economies. McDonald's leadership continues to emphasize long-term resilience. The company retains global brand equity, substantial liquidity, and diversified international revenue streams. Digital ordering infrastructure, loyalty programs, and drive-through efficiency initiatives remain growth levers. International markets offer counterbalancing demand dynamics. Yet the near-term uncertainty persists. Additional tariff escalations could amplify cost volatility. Prolonged inflation could sustain cautious consumer behavior. Geopolitical disruptions or supply bottlenecks could introduce further unpredictability. The company is not collapsing. It is adapting. But its present strain highlights a broader economic lesson. Policy decisions enacted at the federal level cascade through corporate supply chains and ultimately influence everyday transactions. Trade frameworks shape commodity prices. Commodity prices influence menu pricing. Menu pricing influences consumer behavior. Consumer behavior reshapes corporate strategy. The golden arches remain illuminated across highways and urban centers. They still symbolize scale and operational mastery. Yet they also now reflect how even globally dominant corporations operate within economic systems that can shift rapidly. The larger questions remain open. Will supply chains become more localized even if localization raises costs? Will trade tensions moderate, restoring pricing stability? Will consumers recalibrate expectations around affordability? Or will competition drive industry-wide margin compression that reshapes the quick-service landscape? For independent restaurants, the stakes are even higher. Smaller operators lack multinational diversification and deep capital reserves. When macroeconomic strain hits a global chain, adaptation is challenging. When it hits a local business, survival can be uncertain. This period may ultimately serve as a case study in interconnected economic cause and effect. Tariffs designed to protect one sector may inadvertently pressure others. Corporate decisions intended to preserve shareholder value may conflict with public sentiment about domestic employment. Consumers seeking affordability intensify pricing battles that compress margins further. Everything connects. A modest menu price increase can trace its origins back through agricultural markets, transportation networks, currency fluctuations, and policy frameworks. What appears as a simple adjustment on a drive-through screen reflects a web of economic forces. McDonald's will likely endure. Its history demonstrates adaptability across decades of change. It has navigated recessions, commodity shocks, and evolving consumer tastes before. But the current environment represents a stress test unlike recent cycles, a test of pricing power, a test of supply chain flexibility, a test of consumer loyalty, and a test of how national trade policy filters into everyday life. When tariffs rise, the cost does not disappear. It shifts. It travels through farms, factories, warehouses, and distribution hubs. It moves through balance sheets and earnings calls. Eventually, it reaches the checkout counter. The glowing menu board may look unchanged. The logo may remain familiar. But beneath that surface, the intersection of policy and pricing continues to evolve. and the outcome of that intersection is still unfolding, one transaction at a time.